And now from TreasureIslandOldies.com, here's the rock and roll news for the week of May 5th. It was this week in 1997, in the beginning of May, when Treasure Island Oldies went on the air for the very first time in 1997 and continuing on the 16th anniversary this week of the program. Hope you can listen to the entire show at TreasureIslandOldies.com. In other rock and roll news, Buffalo Springfield disbanded after one last Los Angeles concert this week in 1968. Cleveland was named as the site for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum in 1986. In 65, Keith Richards began writing Satisfaction in Clearwater, Florida, in the hotel room where they were staying. Reginald Dwight decided to change his name to Elton John this week in 1968. Billy Preston became the very first rock star to headline New York City's Radio City Music Hall in 1972. The Beatles' album Let It Be was released in England this week in 1970. In 65, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Marianne Faithfull, and Donovan all watched Bob Dylan play the Royal Albert Hall in London. Rock critic John Landau wrote this in 1974. I saw rock and roll's future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. Well, John Landau later became the producer and manager for Bruce Springsteen. Apple Records dissolved this week in 1975. Dusty Springfield made her U.S. television debut in 1964 this week on The Ed Sullivan Show. The Everly Brothers performed for the first time at Nashville's Grand Ole Opry this week in 1957. Same year, Buddy Holly and the Crickets auditioned for Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts TV show, but they were rejected. The Byrds made their TV debut on Hullabaloo in 1965, and they performed Mr. Tambourine Man. The soundtrack to the movie Woodstock was released this week in 1970. In 1990, Ritchie Valens received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Paul Peterson signed with Motown Records, a strange signing, although he never did have a U.S. hit with the label, and he signed with them in 1967. John Lennon appeared on the Dick Cavett Show this week in 1972, and he said that the FBI had been tapping his telephone. Paul Simon began his first post-Simon and Garfunkel solo tour this week in 1973 in Boston. Stevie Wonder gave a free concert for 125,000 people at the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. this week in 1975 for Human Kindness Day. The Mamas and the Papas, Otis Redding and Al Cooper, were all inducted into the Hollywood Rock Walk. Diana Ross got a solo star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1982. Giacomo, owned by A&M Records co-founder Jerry Moss, won the Kentucky Derby at 50-1 odds, 2005. And in 2009, the Canadian horse Mine That Bird also won with the same 50-1 odds. Rick Nelson was inducted posthumously into the Hollywood Rock Walk in 1995. In 1965, Bob Dylan filmed one of the earliest music videos, the famous flashcard clip for Subterranean Homesick Blues. In the studio, Chris Montez recorded Let's Dance in 1962. Chuck Berry cut rock and roll music in 1957. James Brown recorded I Got You, I Feel Good in 65. Major Lance recorded The Monkey Time in 63. The very first Rolling Stones recording session took place this week in 1963. 2 years later, as part of a recording session for Satisfaction that took place during 2 days at the legendary Chess Studios in Chicago in 1965. In 1974, Eric Clapton recorded his cover of the Bob Marley and the Wailers song, I Shot the Sheriff. Birthdays for you, Johnny Taylor, born in 1937. Ace Cannon is 78. Michael Murphy, 74. Kai Winding, born in 1922. Bob Seger is 67. Mary McGregor turns 64. Johnny Maestro from the Crests and later Brooklyn Bridge, born this week in 1939. Jim Lowe is 85 this week and appears to be our senior citizen, in fact. Keith is 63. Teresa Brewer, born in 1931. Jimmy Ruffin is 73. Ricky Nelson, born in 1940. John Fred, born in 1941. Tony Tennille from the Captain and Tennille is 72. Gary Glitter is 68. Tommy Rowe turns 70 this week. Dave Prater from Sam and Dave, born in 1937. Billy Joel turned 63. Clint Holmes, 68. Sonny Curtis is 74. Donovan turned 65. Danny Rapp, from Danny and the Juniors, born in 1941. Larry Williams, born in 1935. Dave Mason, former member of Traffic, is 66. Arthur Alexander, born in 1940. Eric Burden turned 71 this week. Bill Danoff from the Starland Vocal Band is 66. Jack Blanchard is 70. Dorsey Burnett's son Billy, a former member of Fleetwood Mac, is 59. And Richie Furay from Buffalo Springfield and Poco is turning 68. And from TreasureIslandOldies.com, that's your rock and roll news for the week of May the 5th. Come to the Treasure Island Oldies blog for all the late breaking news at TreasureIslandOldies.com. And then click blog. Thanks for listening. I'm Michael Godin.
Treasure Island Oldies.